Hi friends, today I'm going to show you a little bit about how we put together appliques here at the Whole Country Caboodle. I'm going to show you some of the tools that I like to use and just kind of the process that we go through in putting together an applique. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together. So some of the tools that I like to use, first of all, I've got my ironing surface, which today I'm just going to be using this wool mat. And another tool that's really kind of a must in your sewing rooms if you're going to do any amount of fusible applique is a pressing sheet or silicone mat. There have been other mats in the industry, but we love to use these silicone mats, and I'll show you one of the reasons as we kind of move along. I do want you to know that we do have these available here at the Whole Country Caboodle, and if you don't have one, we'd love to send you one. To get started, the first thing that you're going to do when you get one of our little packages, and actually they're going to look a little bit like this, where you get all of your pieces. So what you're going to do is you're going to take all your pieces out, and we laser cut these with a fusible already on the fabric. We use Heat and Bond Light, so it is something that you will want to sew, but it's a great fusible product. So you're going to take all your pieces and you are going to peel the release paper off of the back of each one of your pieces. Now, we recommend that if you have several pieces together on one little cut block, is take the paper off first before you snip them apart. So this one we've got kind of started, and we're going to peel this paper off, and then we're going to snip it apart. Now, sometimes you might get a piece that maybe the fusible isn't already all adhered. And if that's the case, just take it to your iron, give it a quick shot of heat, and it will reactivate that fusible and then peel that paper off. So this one, we get the paper peeled off as well. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not, but the fusible is the shiny side. You'll see it on the back side of your fabric. So we've got all of our paper already peeled off. Then in your pattern, you're going to have a finished layout. And when you open that up, you're going to have the finished drawing of the applique that you have purchased. Now, when you read through the instructions, you're going to read through and see that the dashed line indicates an overlap. So if you see a dashed line here, then you know that piece goes underneath. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that finished drawing and we're going to put it underneath our fusing mat. We've got our applique all ready to assemble now. We've got the paper off of the back. Now, one thing I want to tell you is a lot of our appliques have inner pieces. And so if it does, those are better to assemble before you put your base piece down. So I'm going to show you what I mean by doing this. I've got my pieces already here, and actually these little eyes are going to go down first. Now, this is one of the reasons that I love this silicone mat. These pieces stick before you even use your iron, and that's just kind of a beautiful thing when you're putting these together. Now, this little guy goes on top because I can see a dashed line underneath here. You can see exactly where your pieces go, and you put them in place. Like I said earlier, it's like putting together a puzzle. Now, when we get these pieces where we know we want them, I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to take my dry iron. I will use steam at times, and I'll tell you when I do that, but right now we're just going to use a dry iron on this applique. I'm just going to iron it just a little bit more. Okay. Now, we're going to let that cool. The reason that you want to let it cool is you want your fusible to set back up. You don't want it to be hot. If you peel it off too soon, the fusible could stay on the mat and you want it on the back of the fabric. So we're going to keep letting that cool just a little bit. And I am going to peel this off. So I don't know if you can see it here, but the shininess of the fusible shows that it's on the back of the fabric. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to put the rest of this together. Now, when when putting your base pieces down like this, you don't need to iron them right away because it sticks to the silicone mat. But when I put my fabric pieces on top of my fabric pieces, I instruct to use the tip of your iron to tack those pieces down. Now, the reason that you want to use the tip of your iron and not iron it all down is if you have a piece in the wrong spot and you need to remove it, it's going to be hard to pull apart because once you have the fabric iron to fabric, it doesn't pull apart. So if you use the tip of your iron, it comes apart much easier. Now I'm going to put my base piece down on this little Karen Terrier. I've got the bow tie, and I'm going to tack that with the tip of my iron. And then I've got my inner pieces that I already have assembled, and I can see my outline where the little muzzle pieces go. Even though I can't see all of it, I can see some of it, so I know where the pieces go. Make sure you get them all where you want it. Now I'm going to take a look at this, and I see that I've got all the pieces where I want them. Then I'm going to take my iron. Just a second here. I've got one little piece that I want to make sure, and I can see that I don't have it tucked under enough. This is one of the reasons that you want to just tack it with the tip of your iron. Okay, we've got it now. Now take your iron and run it over the entire applique. You're going to want to probably hold it on there for 3 to 5 seconds, and that is in your instructions. I wouldn't keep it on there too long. You don't want to over-activate that fusible. There we go. We're going to let that cool, and then we're going to peel it off. We're going to give it just a little bit of time so it can cool. One of the things, too, that I want to explain to you about the cross-hatching in the mat is that's to hold the fusible all in place. So you'll see a little cross-hatching that's in between, and that is to hold all of that fusible in place so that it stays on the back of your fabric. I've let this cool probably enough here, and I'm going to peel it off. And you're going to see all of your fusible has stayed on the back of your fabric. So when you get ready to put this on whatever project you're working on, you have one piece that you're working on. And like I say, it takes the guesswork out of where to put these pieces when you're doing your finished projects. We just finished up the Karen Terrier, and I'm going to put another one together for you. This is a golden retriever. So I'm going to start by putting in my inner pieces here. Now, something that you might want to remember is when you're doing some of your smaller pieces, I like to just use a pin to put them in there, and then I iron it. Just a little bit easier. So I'm going to follow that up with my iron. And I'm going to put some of these inner pieces together first before I put the base pieces down, because I can see where they go then. Something you might want to keep in mind as well is some of these pieces are kind of small. And if you are ever missing a piece, don't hesitate to let us know. Oops, here we go. And we'll send you another one. I'm going to put these guys together. Now I'm just going to tack that with the tip of my iron. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let those cool, but I'm going to move this over because now I want to put my base pieces down, and I want to let these cool so I can get them peeled off. Like I said, the beautiful part about this is that these stick before you even iron it. Now I'll get these all ironed once I get them where I want them. Okay, these pieces I know I need to just tack down. The chest piece, I got that cooled. Now, even though I can only see just a little bit underneath here, I know that's where this is going to go. And if you need to, you can lift up to refer. I know that this little piece just goes right underneath the muzzle. And I'm going to tack that down. And I just want to double check where my little nose goes. And it goes right here. And I will peel off my eyes and get those put where I want them. Okay, and I'm just going to double check something here. Just even them out and then run your iron over the entire applique. And of course, we're going to let this cool and then we're going to peel it off. I've got my applique put together. Now my little Cairn Terrier doesn't have a lot of inner detailing, so there isn't a whole lot that I need to do with it. But my Golden Retriever here, it does have some inner detailing, and I want to show you how I go about doing that. Now, when you get the pattern from us, of course it's printed on both sides, and so if you have the availability of making a copy, I would recommend doing that. If you don't, make a simple trace of where you see your inner lines need to be, which on this Golden Retriever is simply the muzzle. And you're going to want to trace that off so that you can put it on either a light table or even by the light of a window. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down on my light table and I'm going to lay my applique over the top of this. Now this is where you'll want to have either a water-soluble quilter's pen. On a lighter fabric, you can use a quilter's pen. If it's a darker fabric, then I would use, say, a chalk pencil would be great. This one, I'm going to use my quilter's pen, and I can see the lines that I need to create this muzzle. And you can kind of lift up and see, too, where it's at. And basically, you just want to trace your lines in. And those are simply going to be stitched lines. And it's a way of kind of making it look like you've got more pieces when you really don't. And you're going to see then how he comes to life, so you can see where you stitch it. I've got my applique assembled, and now I've determined I'm going to put it on this little block of fabric. I'm just going to center it on this block of fabric. And I'm going to iron it in place. Now, one of the things that you have to determine before you stitch is if you're putting it on, say, a single layer of fabric or a single layer, say, of toweling or something, you need to use a stabilizer. Something that I like to use is a very soft, pliable, perforated stabilizer. It's got lots of little holes in it. And what you'll want to do is cut a piece a little larger than your applique, flip your piece over, and put it onto the back side of your fabric so that it covers the entire back piece here. Now, something you can do is to pin that in place. It really kind of sticks in place, but I just pin it just to be sure. And then when you go to stitch your project, you're going to stitch through your thicknesses. And then when you get it all stitched, you'll tear the excess off. Now, the reason that you use a stabilizer is to stabilize the stitches. It's not really for the back of the project or whatever, it's to stabilize the stitches. If you've ever stitched something and you get a real wavy effect on the top, that's because you needed to use a stabilizer. The stabilizer stabilizes the stitches. Now, if you're doing, say, something like this little guy, we've got this little schnauzer on one of our little doodle pads, and I used a fusible batting in this. Then in this case, what I would do is I stitched through the three thicknesses. I had the front piece, the batting, and then the backing piece, and I stitched through all three layers. And in doing so, then you don't need a stabilizer because your quilt, your batting, serves as your stabilizer in something like this. So just remember that if you're in a single thickness of fabric or toweling, make sure you use a stabilizer to stabilize your stitches, and we do have that available here at the Whole Country Caboodle. Let's talk stitches. Now, I get asked a lot of times, Leanne, how do you get those little tiny stitches on those points? And, you know, we have a lot of small pieces. A lot of that is just practice, and I know that probably isn't what you want to hear, but you know, with anything, the more you do, the better you get at it. And so I want to show you just a little bit on a couple of these projects that I have. 99% of what I do is by machine. I do a little bit of hand stuff, but most everything is by machine. By far, my favorite stitch would be the blanket stitch. And that's this stitch along the collar. It's all the way around the muzzle. In fact, it's probably 90% of this little guy. The smaller and narrower your stitch, the easier it's going to be to get onto some of your points. So when you're coming, say, down to a point, always have your needle down and then come back up. The narrower your stitch is, the easier it's going to be. Something else that I like to do is a lot of times on my machine, you can do a mirroring and a reverse. And once you get a little bit more experienced with it, you can do those kinds of things, and that makes it pretty simple as well. I use a simple zigzag or satin stitch. I'll use a back stitch once in a while for some detailing. But like I said, the largest majority of what I do is probably the blanket stitch. Now on this little towel, his little tail, that is done with a simple back stitch, and his little whiskers are just simply a long running stitch. And so that kind of gives you an idea of some of the stitching that we use. Practice, practice, practice is the key to it. And remember to adjust your stitch width and your stitch length according to the size of the piece that you're stitching. We've got our project stitched, and now what I'd like to do is just to show you some of the detailing that I do and the different tools that I use to do that. This little cat we have all stitched, and I want you to see that we put a little dot in the center of the eye. I use a white paint writer you can get at discount stores, and I simply put a dot of white paint in the center of that eye just to add a little twinkle. You'll see that I've got little coloring on the cheeks. That is pretty simple. It is powder blush. The best applicator that you have is actually just the pad of your finger. You bring it over and you put that on the muzzle of your little character. Now, I do use a couple of different pens to do detailing. You'll see the little dots on his cheeks. I also will do dots, you know, on the eyes sometimes. The two pens that I like to use, the first one is a Micron Pigma pen in black, and it's the 01. It's fine, but it's not ultra fine. This is a great pen. It's an archival ink, so you can use it on cotton without it bleeding. You can sign your quilts with it. It's a great pen to have in your sewing room. Another one that I like to use is simply a fine tip Sharpie marker. And that I do a lot of the detailing on the batting with the fine tip Sharpie marker. So the little dots for the cheeks, that would be something that you would use for that. Now, another thing that you might want to do is if you are doing, say, a project, a no-sew project, like on this little gift bag, then you can do the detailing, say, around, make it look like it's stitched. You can do the drawing, adding on the inside to add detail, and those can all be done with your black markers. Now that you've had kind of a flyover of our applique process, we want to show you just a few projects that you might think about doing. These are available on our website. We've got project sheets for all kinds of things. We've got stockings, we've got little doodle pads that we've shown you here, simple little projects, towels, and the towels are available on the website as well. Or if you really want to do something that is no sewing at all, which is great for kids, of course age appropriate to use an iron, you might think about putting an applique on these little clipboards or a brown paper bag, something as simple as that. And of course, we like to say to think outside the box and put the applique on the box. One of the things I will say, if you're going to use our clipboard, and we do put this on the back side of it, is maybe not to iron the applique onto the MDF board. You can, but any amount of steam might raise it just a little bit. So simply turn it over, spray it with a spray adhesive, and then adhere it onto the clipboard. So it just makes a quick, easy project. We really hope you have enjoyed this today. We invite you to visit our website, thewholecountrycaboodle.com, and please don't let applique intimidate you in any way. It's so fun, it's so simple, and it creates the best little projects.